Dude, I shot a 5-shot 38 one time without earplugs. Okay, I was landscaping this guy's yard, right? He comes out at the end of the job. He goes, hey, I got this 5-shot 38. You want to go down the street? You know, there's a burned out car. Maybe we take a couple shots or whatever, you know? You know what's funny? Every other state is fucking dying laughing at this point in the joke because it's so goddamn ridiculous until I get down to the South. And you guys just sit here staring at me like, all right, so, you know, what happened? You know, pretty standard. I mean, I thought this was going to be a comedy show. I mean, what you're reading from your journal? I don't understand what the, not a real compelling story. I'm mowing a fucking lawn and a stranger comes out with a weapon and says, let's shoot it at a burned out car. Okay? Jesus Christ, can we agree on that?
Good morning. It's Thursday, Delta Force Thursday, March the 28th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and Inside Delta Force. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now a little bit of Mafia action.
So that's my take on that for the moment. You know, many years ago, after I had received my instruction from Tom DeBella, who was the boss of my family at the time, my father proposed me. I went to see Tom. A guy by the name of Little Jojo Baitaco. He was a soldier under my dad, very, very loyal. He was very happy the day that I went to visit Tom, the fact that I was proposed. I knew him all my life. And I've gotten instruction from Tom about what I needed to do as a recruit, just every day you're at the call of your boss, and whatever you're told to do, you do. If your mother is sick and dying, you're at her bedside, you leave your mother's side, you come to serve the family if you're called. That's the kind of commitment. But look, one of the horrors of that life, I'll say it, is that there is a lot of violence. People get killed. People get murdered. We understand that. People have said to me, well, Michael, you weren't a real gangster. You didn't kill anybody. People, let me tell you this. You spent 20 years in that life as a made guy. Unfortunately, you see your share of violent acts. I'm going to leave it at that. And again, I don't like to talk about it, but it's a fact. That's it. So after I got my commission, I would say, from Tom DeBella, Little Jojo started talking to me, started schooling me a little bit. He was around a long time. Of course, my dad was my advisor, a counselor, as was Andrew Russo. We talked about him. He passed away a short time ago. But Jojo said, Mike, look, one of the realities of this life is you're going to be involved. There's violence. You're going to see it. It's going to be around you. It's not pleasant, but when you got to do what you got to do or see what you got to see, that's a fact of this life. So he says, I want to take you on a drive somewhere. And we went to a place that's kind of on the borderline between Queens and Brooklyn, and it's a place called The Hole. And unfortunately, it was kind of a burial ground for a lot of guys. They called it Gotti's favorite burial place. Again, I don't know if that's a fact or not. That's what they've called it. Obviously, I heard things on the street, and it was the worst part of town that you want to be in. It was like just a desolate area. It smelled because they didn't have sewer systems in there. They had to use septic tanks and cesspools. It was probably the worst part of town that you could be in. Think of your worst part of town, wherever you live, and this being worse than that. It was kind of abandoned. Not people lived there because they had to live there. It was kind of poverty-stricken, or maybe because they just liked the isolation, because nobody would really go down there. There was nothing attractive about it. And way back in the early 80s, there was a couple of kids that were playing, and they smelled something horrible, and they went to see what it was, in the area that the odor was coming from, and it was a dead body. And that kind of attracted the police to the area, and they started digging up bodies there. And yes, it was a burial ground for the mob. Sonny Red, you know who Sonny Red is? He was one of the bodies that was dug up there. You saw the movie Donnie Brasco. You remember the feud between Sonny Red and Sonny Black. You remember the scene where Sonny Red was killed, where him and part of his crew, they were killed. That's where the bodies were buried. And another couple of guys that I can mention, you would know their names. And I think if anybody took the time to really excavate that area, they would find a ton of dead bodies there, because it was a burial ground, and who knows how far back it was. And so Jojo took me for a ride there, and he said, Michael, hopefully the day won't come when you ever need to visit this place again, but I want to make you aware of certain things. And this was one of a few places that he took me to. And again, it's called The Hole. Desolate part of town, ugly part of town. The stench, the odor is still there. I think it's in being it's on the borderline of Queens and Brooklyn, there are two police departments that actually patrol this area. They don't even want to go there, from what I understand. And I heard that from law enforcement that was around. They don't even want to go there. So the place is known now. I would assume that every once in a while, if a body is missing, that's the place they go to see if maybe they can dig it up, or there's a fresh burial place that they'll recognize. But it's that kind of place. It's flooded all the time because, again, there is no real sewage system there. Cesspools and septic tanks, they're not the ideal way of getting rid of sewage, and especially when they're not kept up, in the right way. A bad place. And, look, there's a lot of guys on YouTube, and they talk about, murder and a lot of the violence in that. And people have knocked me, they've called me a racketeer and not a gangster. And I can tell you this, people, I take that as a compliment. I don't want to be known as the guy that was happy to pull the trigger. I don't want to be known as the guy that was the first cause of action. Look, we can talk about Roy DeMeo because everybody knows it's public, it's there. We know what he did at the Gemini Lounge. And if you look at Roy and you read everything about him, you say, hey, that's a guy that loved to kill people. He got off on it. This was his way of solving problems. And there were certain guys in that life that acted that way. I have to be honest. Greg Scarpa, maybe it didn't bother him when he had to pull the trigger. I knew Greg pretty well. I'm not going to comment beyond that. He has his reputation. And there are a few guys, we talk about the Iceman. We've saw movies about him that were embellished, no question about it. These movies are embellished. We talked about, a lot of other guys. I don't have to mention all their names. Look, it's an unpleasant part of the life. It really is. And unfortunately, when this happens, you have to do something to dispose of the body, right? And so they have places like this. There's another one, Jersey, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, where bodies were found and bodies were disposed of. It's almost like I don't even know how to continue the conversation myself other than to tell you this. People, murder, violence, it's an ugly part of life. And we see so much of it lately. We see it in our schools. We see it in our churches. We see it everywhere. And we can blame guns. It's not about the guns. It's about the people that have the guns. And let me tell you this. Again, I'm not going to get into the politics. But it's like drugs. You make drugs illegal, there'll be more drugs on the street than you can imagine. There's a black market for these things. We have to find a solution to this. To me, listen, when you don't have God in your life and you don't have an end game, listen, my end game is to get to heaven. That's what Christians believe. We're on this earth. It's a journey. But the end game for us is to get to heaven. We believe there is a heaven. We believe there is a hell. And we understand what we need to do to get to heaven. And that is to repent our sins and to believe in Jesus. And that's what motivates us and drives us. And, some of you that don't share our faith, you can say that's a fairy tale. But we don't believe that. We believe strongly in our faith. And if it keeps us on the right track, and it stops us from doing some of the things that we're seeing. A lot of people say religion is the cause of violence. Well, no, a distorted view of religion might be the cause of violence. There might be a distortion there that causes it. But people that have faith and believe in God and believe in love and mercy, that's not what the cause of violence is. It's people that distort that belief, distort that faith, distort that love and mercy and grace. That's what that's all about. So, people, look, I can go on, but I'm very disturbed about this. Look, I have 7 kids. I got 6 grandchildren, and I love young people. And to see something like this happen is just so tragic, and it's going to go on for days, and we're going to mourn this, and we're going to hope to God that it doesn't happen again. And I'm imploring our government, our law enforcement, our local politicians, find a solution. Listen, if it's to put security guards in schools, if that's what it's come to, fine. They don't have to be so overt as to scare kids. Most of these retired law enforcement people, they're nice people. They know how to deal with children. They love kids. They're not going to be so ostentatious and so out there that they're going to scare people around them. But gosh, they're trained. They understand. They can see things. This is what they do. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. But, all the local politicians, the local school groups, they got to get together and find a solution because this is happening far too often. And we don't want to have a burial ground in cemeteries similar to a burial ground that we have with mobsters. We don't want this. We don't want it. And we got to find a solution to it. So all I can say is, my heart goes out to all the people out there that are suffering this terrible tragedy. It's the families that really suffer. My heart goes out to you. My prayers go out to you. And I just really hope, again, we do find a solution to this. And that's what we all as a community, as a nation, as a people need to work towards.
And that was Mafia Action. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Patriotic Shorts.
Ever seen a beast so fierce it owns the sky? Meet the Black Snake Super A-10 Warthog. But why does it dominate? Let's find out in 59 seconds. At its heart, a cannon so powerful it shreds through tanks like paper. This is the GAU-8 Avenger, but brute force isn't its only trick. It's armored to withstand serious hits, making it nearly indestructible. Its agility is unmatched. Designed for low-speed precision, it dances in combat zones where others dare not enter. And with twin engines, it laughs in the face of danger, capable of returning home even if one is damaged. But the real magic? The heroes behind the controls, skilled pilots with nerves of steel. So why does the Black Snake A-10 Warthog dominate the skies? Unrivaled firepower, armor, agility, and the heart of a warrior.
Unfortunately, just before I arrived at the briefing, the North Vietnamese sprung an ambush. I was separated from my company, traveling with my two RTOs, radio telephone operators. You reach for the headphone and they're always there. Safest place for me was back with my company because I had trained with them and I knew where all my NCOs and officers were. In an attempt to get back to my unit, got up from my position, started to negotiate my way back to my unit, lost both of my radio operators. I'm not sure, and these are some of my demons that I have to deal with, is I don't know whether I left them or they were killed as we were negotiating our way back to my unit.
Why is it that U.S. fighter jets look dirty, but Russian and Chinese jets look clean and new? Let me explain. Most people think that the marks you see on U.S. fighter jets are battle scars from previous missions. Unlike Chinese jets, which are mainly used for air shows and displays, American fighters are put to the test constantly, collecting gunpowder residue, engine oil, and fuel gunk that sticks to the body of the aircraft. But cleaning a jet isn't just like washing your car. It takes dangerous anti-corrosion fluids and tons of water, especially near saltwater bases. Fighters kept on carriers get so dirty due to the sea, but some jets might need a paint makeover. The U.S. likes to use a matte gray for stealth, while Russians prefer a glossy camo look. They could be ahead of everyone with this blue jet. However, Chinese jets have also gone for a dark stealth paint look lately, before they were too busy looking great at air shows. So when you spot a dirty U.S. fighter jet, it's not just getting old, it's a sign that it has been on lots of missions.
The 120mm guns of the M1A1 and M1A2 are in fact German Rheinmetall RH-120s, manufactured under license in the US, a 5.3 meter long, 3.3 ton smoothbore cannon. This large bulge in the middle of the cannon is designed to evacuate the barrel of propellant gases after each firing. Once the round leaves the barrel, atmospheric pressure can prevent the gases from leaving. And once the breech is opened, the potentially harmful and explosive gas can enter the crew compartment. The bore evacuator is a pretty simple solution, with holes that allow gases to enter the evacuator as the round passes by. This acts like a pressure reservoir. When a round leaves the barrel with this attachment, the pressure is released from the forward-facing holes at the far end of the evacuator, and this pushes the remaining gases outwards.
Primarily, Aziz was my teammate. He was assigned to me as my interpreter, but he eventually worked his way into being a number two guy and our teammate, even part of planning operations. I watched him over the years put his life on the line for Americans that he never met before. For me, saved my life multiple times. One example was with those 14 guys. They were doing an operation. They had an asset that was part of this program. I can't talk about it exactly, but because they were with this asset, they couldn't leave this asset. If they would have put a QRF in there to get those guys, the operation would have been compromised. This place is like a hornet's nest for Taliban. He came up with a way to go get them. He had to get us through all the checkpoints to get us there. We had to figure it out. He and I got in a car and we drove through the night and scooped those guys up and got them out of there. It was actually pretty funny and not the most tactical or sexy scene. Like, we're looking for them where they're supposed to be. Where the heck are these guys? They're like behind this bush like a caca.
Are you kidding me?
I'm like...
Here we are, a death group.
Now, here's something that, most people don't know. You stand in front of the wing commander when you're getting certified to carry nuclear weapons. So the wing commander asks you a question. Here's your target. You draw on the board. You're heading distances and times. He asks questions. What if you lose your engine? Can you still deliver the weapon? And, if you do well, then you're certified. And they give you an eye patch. Remember why they gave us an eye patch? Because, God forbid, we ever went into a nuclear war with intercontinental ballistic missiles being launched with submarines. Guys like us carrying weapons like this on this airplane. If a nuclear weapon exploded in front of you, it didn't blow you out of the sky, then you'd be blinded, so you put an eye patch on.
So if you were blinded, take the eye patch off.
That's right, you got a good eye.
Their job was a simple to-casualty evacuation mission. In 2009, Chief Warrant Officer James Woolley and his crew were called for a casualty evacuation mission in Baghdis Province, western Afghanistan. During the approach, they were forced to take evasive action due to enemy fire. Woolley pressed on to the landing zone, and as soon as the helicopter touched down, it began taking fire. 5 wounded service members were loaded onto the helicopter, and within a minute, an RPG entered through the nose of the aircraft, passed between the pilots, struck the flight engineer in the back of his helmet, and fell to the ground without detonating. Woolley kept the helicopter on the ground until the wounded could be loaded, and after taking that load of soldiers to base, he determined the helicopter was still flyable and returned to the battle to pick up another load of casualties. Woolley was awarded a Silver Star in 2010 for his efforts.
And that was the Patriotic Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little motivation.
What I'd like for you to do right now, I want you to think about your dream and envision it. I don't know what that dream is that you have. I don't care how far-fetched it might appear to be. I don't care how disappointing it might have been as you've been working toward that dream. But here's what I know. That dream that you're holding in your mind, that it's possible. See, sometimes we can't say, I can do that. But what we can say, that it's possible that I can have my dream as we run toward it, as we work on it day in and day out, that in the process of working on your dreams, you are going to incur a lot of disappointment, a lot of failure, a lot of pain, a lot of setbacks, a lot of defeats. But in the process of doing that, you will discover some things about yourself that you don't know right now. What you will realize is that you have greatness within you. What you'll realize is that you're more powerful than you can ever begin to imagine. What you will realize is that you're greater than your circumstances, that you don't have to go through life being a victim. So I applaud you for your dreaming, for your running toward your dream. I applaud you for believing in yourself, because that's what life is about, stretching and challenging, looking for ways that you can begin to improve yourself. It's necessary to know that everybody won't see it, that everybody won't join you, that everybody won't have the vision. It's necessary to know that a lot of people like to complain, but they don't want to do anything about their situation, that you are an uncommon breed. You know, you have to know within yourself that I can do this. Even if no one else sees it for me, I must see it for myself.
Don't let anybody ever tell you that you're not good enough. And so many young people think that they can't, or they don't have the potential, or somebody else is better. Forget everything about it. I mean, if you really want something bad enough, if you really, really want something bad enough, you'll figure out a way to get there. And I really believe if you want something bad enough, you can will it to happen.
I had to convince myself that I'm going to make it, regardless of how people felt at that time. And there's going to be points that people are going to mistake my confidence for arrogance, because they don't understand the process I went through and how much I had to believe in myself in order to make these things happen. I feel like you can will yourself into a good space. Like, things that are meant to happen will. And if you believe in yourself enough, you can help yourself learn. You can inspire, yourself in different ways where you can actually discipline yourself, to the point that you can become good enough.
If you can, for the rest of your life, live inside of yourself, stop listening to people who are calling you fat. Everything that is makes no sense. All these insecure people putting their insecurities on you, you got to flush it out. You got to just be whoever the hell God or whatever the hell you believe in. If you believe in nothing but yourself, I don't care what it is. You got to take everything and throw it away. You have to believe in one thing, and that is yourself.
There will be people along the way who will say to you, you're dreaming too big. It's not possible. Don't allow anyone to tell you that what you are dreaming is not possible. It is possible.
I don't expect you to believe in my dream like I believe in my dream. And the problem with some of y'all is you want somebody else to support your dream. It's yours. I don't owe you a dime. It's your dream. If you want it to happen, get your butt up and make it happen. If you want it to happen, rise and grind.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Law for March the 28th.
March 28th. Move beyond intellect. Through intense absorption in a particular field over a long period of time, masters come to understand all of the parts involved in what they are studying. They reach a point where all of this has become internalized, and they are no longer seeing the parts, but gain an intuitive feel for the whole. They literally see or sense the dynamic. In the living sciences, we have the example of Jane Goodall, who studied chimpanzees in the wilds of East Africa for years as she lived among them. Interacting with them constantly, she reached a point where she began to think like a chimpanzee and could see elements of their social life that no other scientist had come close to fathoming. She gained an intuitive feel for not only how they functioned as individuals, but as a group, which is an inseparable part of their lives. She made discoveries about the social life of chimpanzees that forever altered our conception of the animal, and that are no less scientific for depending on this deep level of intuition. Daily Law. Over time, masters gain an intuitive feel for the whole of their field. It's an excitement and joy that awaits you if you are patient. Mastery, Chapter 6. Fuse the intuitive with the rational. Mastery.
And that was the Daily Law for March the 28th, Move Beyond Intellect, from the book The Daily Laws by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
I can't tell you how many times I heard this little adage. It's not about what you do, it's who you are. It's not doing that matters so much, it's being that matters. I mean, I'll admit there's something to that distinction. Sure, I get it. At the same time, I've always felt that distinction is simplistic, as though we can simply divorce our being from our action. When, in point of fact, I think our being is deeply influenced by our acting and by our doing. Work has a lot to do with the kind of people that we become. In our moral choices, we make ourselves the people that we are becoming. And in a similar way, in the work that we do, we become the people that we are meant to be.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, "There has never been a philosophy, a theory, or a doctrine that attacked, or limited, reason, which did not also preach submission to the power of some authority. Power seekers have always known that if men are to be made submissive, the obstacle is not their feelings, their wishes, or their instincts, but their minds. If men are to be ruled, then the enemy is reason." Unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now we pick up where we left off with the 33 strategies of war.
Interpretation. On one level, war is a relatively simple affair. You maneuver your army to defeat your enemy by killing enough of its soldiers, taking enough of its land, or making yourself secure enough to proclaim victory. You may have to retreat here and there, but your intention is eventually to advance as far as possible. Negotiation, on the other hand, is almost always awkward. On the one hand, you need both to secure your existing interests and to get as much on top of them as you can. On the other hand, you need to bargain in good faith, make concessions, and gain the opposing side's trust. To mix these needs is an art, and an almost impossible one, for you can never be sure that the other side is acting in good faith. In this awkward realm between war and peace, it is easy to misread the opponent, leading to a settlement that is not in your long-term interest. Philip's solution was to see negotiation not as separate from war, but rather as an extension of it. Negotiation, like war, involved maneuver, strategy, and deception, and it required you to keep advancing, just as you would on the battlefield. It was this understanding of negotiation that led Philip to offer to leave Amphipolis independent while promising to take it for Athens later on, a promise he never meant to keep. This opening maneuver bought him friendship and time, and kept the pesky Athenians out of his hair while he dealt with his enemies elsewhere. The peace of Philocrates similarly covered his moves in central Greece and kept the Athenians off balance. Having decided at some point that his ultimate goal was to unite all of Greece and lead it on a crusade against Persia, Philip determined that Athens, with its noble history, would have to function as a symbolic center of the Hellenic League. His generous peace terms were calculated to purchase the city's loyalty. Philip never worried about breaking his word. Why should he sheepishly honor his agreements when he knew the Athenians would find some excuse later on to extend their outposts to the north at his expense? Trust is not a matter of ethics. It is another maneuver. Philip saw trust and friendship as qualities for sale. He would buy them from Athens later on when he was powerful and had things to offer it in exchange. Like Philip, you must see any negotiating situation in which your vital interests are at stake as a realm of pure maneuver, warfare by other means. Earning people's trust and confidence is not a moral issue, but a strategic one. Sometimes it is necessary, sometimes it isn't. People will break their word if it serves their interests, and they will find any moral or legal excuse to justify their moves, sometimes to themselves as well as to others. Just as you must always put yourself in the strongest position before battle, so it is with negotiation. If you are weak, use negotiations to buy yourself time, to delay battle until you are ready. Be conciliatory, not to be nice, but to maneuver. If you are strong, take as much as you can before and during negotiations. Then later you can give back some of what you took, conceding the things you least value to make yourself look generous. Do not worry about your reputation or about creating distrust. It is amazing how quickly people will forget your broken promises when you are strong and in a position to offer them something in their self-interest.
And that was the 33 Strategies of War, the next part of Chapter 21, Negotiate While Advancing. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you're a Democrat, you need to vote Republican and become a Republican because President Biden is not only the face of the country, the leader of the country, but he is the titular head of the Democrat Party. And what he does reflects on the Democrat Party and everybody in it. So right now, the Democrat Party is a party that wanders around not knowing where it's going, what it's doing, or what it's saying. It is brain-addled. And you, as a voter, deserve better. That's why you need to vote Republican. Back in a minute. Thank you. So on the bridge collapse, this goes right back to government failures and government failures to regulate. And as I've said in the past, regulation is stupid. It's the idea is that the people that work for government are inherently more trustworthy than people that work for businesses, and it's just baloney on its face. But I've been outvoted. Everybody else in the United States thinks that regulation is really swell. Well, here's an example of we're paying taxes to regulators, federal, state, and local, and they failed to do their job. And what the worst part about this, the most ironic part about this, Maersk, who is apparently the shipping company, will get sued. Maybe the captain of the ship will get sued. But the people that should get sued, the Department of Transportation and the state and local officials, they will skate, because that's the way it works every single time. And it shouldn't. Everybody in the United States of America is paying taxes to the federal government, to a Department of Transportation that is supposed to be there to make sure that we don't get price gouged, make sure there's no monopolies, and make sure that we have no disasters. And it has failed yet again, the federal government. We had in Ohio where a train derailed and spewed toxic chemicals all over the place. Where were the regulators? Why was this allowed to happen? Okay, and the same thing goes here. Why was this allowed to happen? That's the answers we need. I don't care what the captain did. The question is, why was he allowed to do it? Okay, I understand that he didn't drop anchor. Why? Why wasn't there a regulator there to make sure that he dropped anchor before he hit the bridge? Those are the answers that we need. And if you're going to sue the federal government. They're the ones that want to be activistic. They're the ones that want to get in, and they're the ones that are deciding that what businesses are good businesses, what businesses are bad businesses, and what to do about that. And they failed over and over and over again. So the message is that some of us might do business with Maersk. The vast majority of us probably don't, but we all pay federal taxes. We all pay the Department of Transportation, and we need to put pressure on the government. The government wants to get involved in regulating, and the American people think that that's a swell idea. Okay, I'm outvoted, but damn it, if you're going to regulate, then damn it, you better regulate. And this is a failure of regulation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now we pick up where we left off with Inside Delta Force.
The whole ordeal had lasted no more than 10 minutes, but it seemed like several lifetimes. Even now, I shudder on the inside just to think about it. How can I explain the sensation of being the focus of attention for 20 machine guns? It's worse than being under artillery fire. At least when the big guns are pounding you, there is the prospect of taking cover. Even if you're caught in the open, you can flatten out on the ground. And believe me, you'll try to hide behind a thick blade of grass if that's all you have. But in the air, you just have to take it. You make yourself as small as possible. You even think small. You sink your head as deep as you can into your shoulders, draw all your muscles up into a knotted bundle, pull your limbs in just as tightly as you can, and take small, shallow breaths. When you can see the tracer streams coming at you, the thought's always in your mind that between each tracer, there are 4 other bullets that you can't see. We were landing on a small helicopter pad on the rear deck of a destroyer, the USS Moosbrugger, I found out later. We hit the deck and bounced to a stop. Get the wounded out and inside was all I could think as I lurched up to jump out. I had been sitting with my left leg tucked under me, unable to move since we left Barbados. The leg was numb and asleep, but I didn't know it, and as I bounded out of the helicopter, it collapsed underneath me and I crashed to the deck. I rolled over and examined my leg for an unknown wound and was glad to find none. I was struggling to my feet to help the Navy crewmen who were pulling the wounded out of the bird when the sailor who was running the flight pad helped me up and asked with a shocked look on his face, "Are you okay, buddy?" "Yeah, I'm all right," I yelled over the roar of the helicopter. "My leg was asleep, that's all." "Your face and head are covered with blood," he yelled back. I ran my hand across my skull and face and pulled it away, covered in blood. Then it hit me. It wasn't my blood. It was blood that had been blowing off the wounded navigator sitting just in front of me in the bird. "It ain't mine," I yelled. "Good," he yelled back at me. "Now help me make that pilot fly this damn thing off of here before we shove it over the side." "Why?" I screamed over the roar of the chopper. "Because it's so damn full of holes I could see through it as you flared to land. It's leaking fuel and hydraulic fluid like a sieve. It's a hazard to the safety of this ship." "That's your problem," I shouted as I limped over to help with the wounded. But that was one tough bird. She flew and fought the whole rest of the day. We hustled our wounded inside the small bay forward of the helicopter pad. The floor of the room was covered with the wounded from birds 1 and 2, and the place stank with the coppery smell of their blood. Smiley was an SF medic, and he was already at work with the Navy corpsman and the doctor. I helped get IVs started and then moved around to talk to the guys. I sat with Don before a chopper arrived to carry him to the operating room on the hospital ship, the Iwo Jima. He was gray, and his eyes were dilating from blood loss and the resulting shock. But just before he was carried to the bird, Smiley came running up from below with a bottle of oxygen, plastered a mask across his face, and hit him with the O2. Within seconds, some of the pallor of death left his face, and the size of his pupils started to decrease. I shifted over to talk to one of our radio operators who was snarling and cursing in pain. He had been shot twice in the thigh, in almost the same spot. When the first round hit him, he clapped a hand to the wound, just in time for the second bullet to take the ends off 2 of his fingers. He was lying on his stomach with the back of his right thigh ripped to pieces. I asked him how he felt, and he said that his leg didn't bother him much, but his fingers hurt like hell. Andre was sitting off to the side by himself with a thoughtful look on his face. I sat down beside him and asked him if he thought maybe he should see a medic. He just shook his head and said, "No." I left him alone and moved over to Greg Halligan, one of our new guys, who was also sitting by himself. Greg had a sad, hangdog look on his face. I decided I'd lighten up his attitude. "Hey, man, how's it going? You're not hurt, are you?" I asked him, clapping a hand on his back. "Nah, I'm okay, I guess. But my foot hurts," he said, staring across the room full of wounded men. "I sat on it the whole way from Barbados and it went to sleep on me. Now it aches like hell." "Well, let me just take a look at that foot," I said, trying to make a joke of it. "Maybe all it needs is a little massage to make it good as new again. Which one is it?" He slid his left foot forward. I took one look at it and said, "My friend, that foot has a perfect reason to hurt. You've been shot just below the top of the boot. The bullets gouged out a path from front to rear, about a half an inch deep." He looked down at his foot, wiggled it a little bit, and said with wonder in his voice, "Well, goddamn, no wonder it hurts." His whole face brightened almost immediately. Nothing like knowing you're shot to perk a man up. We put a field dressing on his leg. A chopper was coming back for us, so the unperforated and the walking wounded alike climbed aboard to return to the island and finish the job. The Rangers were just a few minutes out, and we had to help sweep the high ground overlooking the airfield where they would land. It was less than a mile to shore, so we flitted just barely over the surface of the water toward the seaward end of the airfield. Several of the other birds had already landed, and the guys had moved up into the brush-covered hills to flush out any riflemen or machine guns that could hamper the parachute drop. Don Feeney's team joined mine, and together we shifted one ridgeline over, spread out in an open formation, and started moving up to the highest point of the hill. We had just gotten to the top when someone shouted, "There are the planes!" I turned around just in time to see a line of C-130s coming in low from the east. But as they approached the leading edge of the airfield, the first 2 planes were plastered with automatic cannon fire. The lead plane broke away, but the others just kept coming, and then we could see the Rangers pouring out the jump doors and into the sky. They were jumping at such a low altitude that their parachutes opened only a few seconds before they hit the ground. God damn, what a stirring sight. This was the first combat parachute operation since the Second World War. We quickly got out some air-ground signal panels to let them know we were friendly and fired over the next ridge toward those 23 millimeters to give the gunners a little something to worry about. The first pass of the planes had dumped about a company of Rangers, and now the planes were circling and heading back for the second drop. Rangers were scattered down the length of the 10,000-foot runway, just getting out of their parachutes, when two armored vehicles rolled out onto the airfield and started firing their machine guns and heavy cannon. "Oh, hell, not that!" I yelled in frustration. "The sons of bitches will cut our men to pieces." But almost as soon as the vehicles gained the center of the runway, the Rangers opened fire on them with two 90-millimeter recoilless rifles, abruptly ending the armor threat on Point Salines. Now the second pass was overhead, and the air was full of green parachutes dangling brave men. So the automatic weapons shifted their focus from the airplanes to the men in the air and on the ground. This is bad, I thought, watching the fire rip across the far end of the runway. This is when a unit is the most vulnerable, just as they land and their leaders are scattered and they haven't had the time to reorganize. But then I saw an amazing sight. The Rangers rose from the ground as one organism, screaming their war cries, and assaulted straight across the airfield toward the enemy guns. Within 10 minutes, the guns went silent. The third and last pass of Rangers jumped almost unmolested. Later that day, I learned that a corporal had led the spontaneous assault across the airfield. Somebody said the guy jumped up from the ground and shouted, "I've had enough of this shit," and took off across the airfield toward the enemy positions. Every man near him jumped up to follow, and the attack spread like wildfire up and down the length of the airfield. God damn, what soldiers. We moved over to the next hill mass to see if we could provide any support, but now it was a pure-ass infantry fight, and besides, we were in a fairly degraded state. Minutes later, planes started landing and disgorging troops and equipment. A Squadron arrived in their C-141s. They hauled out the little birds they were going to use, spread the rotors into position, cranked up, and took off to attack Fort Rupert. They were back in 10 minutes. The aerial fire from the heavy guns around the fort was so heavy, the pilots wouldn't fly into it. Rightfully so, in my opinion. About the time A Squadron returned, Steve Ansley's team came back. They'd headed out on a mission to rescue the guys who had crashed in Bird 5. The Bird had almost made it back to the coast before she went down. The pilot was able to fly her into the ground, but she went in hard. All her hydraulic lines had been shot away, so the pilot had little control left as he put her into the trees. The impact was so severe that the tail broke completely off, and the main rotor blades flew off in every direction. Then the Bird rolled over twice. By the grace of God, only one man was thrown out in the roll, but the Bird came to rest on top of him. He was pinned half underneath her, just as they caught on fire, and just as a Cuban patrol attacked. The men on board were in pretty bad shape from the trauma of the crash. The scalding hydraulic fluid spewing from the shot-out hydraulic lines had blinded more than half of them. Even blind and disoriented, Chris Cable managed to crawl uphill in the direction of the attacking Cubans. By listening to the gunfire and firing toward the sound, he was able to hold them at bay. The fire had taken firm hold of the cockpit, and the pilot was caught in his seat, the flames lapping his body. Though badly wounded himself, Amos Horton ran around to the cockpit, intending to kill him rather than let him burn to death, when he saw that the pilot had been shot through the head and was already dead. John Ginniff was the operator trapped under the helicopter, and as the flames spread rapidly down the fuselage, he called out to his mates, "Don't let me burn!" 3 of his injured comrades wedged themselves under the burning helicopter and, in an amazing display of desperate strength, straightened up and lifted the massive Bird with their backs, allowing John to be dragged to safety. Steve's team landed on the beach near the crash site and moved in to help. Following the sounds of firing, Steve moved uphill and found Chris behind a small tree, his magazines and grenades laid out in front of him so he could tell them apart by touch, single-handedly holding off the Cuban attackers. They fired off several magazines together, and Steve threw a couple of hand grenades, enough to discourage the Cubans. The Cubans pulled back, and Steve was able to bring Chris down the hill unmolested. Everyone on the Bird was badly injured. The door gunner was wounded the worst. He'd been hit by a large caliber round that all but amputated his foot. The foot was dangling by just a shred of skin and sinew as they moved him to the beach. Ginniff was also in rough shape. Before the crash, he had been shot through the leg, and when the helicopter rolled over on him and pinned him to the ground, it crushed his pelvis. Both he and the door gunner would eventually be retired as a result of their wounds. The guys were flown out to the hospital ship, the Iwo Jima, and turned over to the Navy medical teams. It was hot and dry on our hill, so Doc Smiley went in search of some water for us. When he returned, he sat down with Andre and asked to see his leg. By way of an answer, Andre asked for a scalpel. Smiley headed out again, returning a little while later with a tube of betadine, a fresh bandage, and a brand new scalpel still in its paper cover. Andre cut open his trousers with his field knife and exposed a fist-sized black bruise on the top of his thigh. Right in the center of the bruise, underneath the skin, was a small lump. Andre cleaned his hands and then smeared betadine over the bruise. He pinched the lump in the bruise like he was squeezing a pimple and made a deft slice in the middle with the scalpel. Out popped the bullet. He set it aside while he cleaned both the entry wound and the site of the operation, and then he bandaged his leg. I never saw him so much as flinch as he doctored himself. In fact, he hummed a tune the whole time. When the unit surgeon examined the wound the next day, he declared he couldn't have done a better job himself. My friend Andre is one hell of an hombre. And that pretty much wrapped up our day on the lovely island paradise of Grenada. We were home that night by 10 o'clock. I returned a few days later on the off chance of doing a little sniping, but nothing came of it. The Rangers and the 82nd stayed for a few more weeks to finish mopping up, and then a multinational Caribbean police force was instituted to maintain order until Grenada organized herself once more. America declared a great victory and felt good about herself again. In fact, military enlistments took such a jump that a 3rd Ranger Battalion was formed, and the Ranger Regiment of today came into being. And at the prodding of Congress, the U.S. military started to take a much closer look at enhancing the interoperability of the military services. This eventually resulted in the creation of the U.S. Special Operations Command, USSOCM, which has done wonders for the special operations capability of our nation. Castro went into a snit and declared he didn't want his captive soldiers back. The Red Cross finally made arrangements to fly the poor guys home. Life went on in the rest of the world as though nothing much had happened. And that 10,000-foot runway brings in a few peaceful visitors to Grenada now and then.
And that was Inside Delta Force from by Eric L. Haney, Command Sergeant Major, retired. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.